You can start now your conference. Everybody's listening.
Oh, okay. I can start now. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for coming to this occasion. It's a great honor for me to be able to be there with you, even if it's only in this distant way. I wish I could be present sitting with you and we could talk in dialogue. But dialogue is somewhat what I want to talk about today. First of all, let me ask, are we communicating? Am I reaching you? Can you shake your head yes if I'm communicating? Ah, wonderful. All right. Thank you. Okay, I will try to talk slowly and clearly if I can, but sometimes I become enthusiastic. I want to talk a little bit about some of my present discontent with psychology and about alternative ways of going. Most of you who know my work are aware that I have been a long-standing critic of a good deal of what we do as psychological research and activity. At present, that critique centers on pretty much the irrelevance of most psychological research and practice. That is, the way in which what we do, particularly in academic psychology, doesn't affect anything. It's like we almost do it for ourselves. Do the research so we can share it among us, write it in our journals, put it in our books. And the society which supports us doesn't benefit very much. And that concerns me, as we should be part of the society. We should be contributing to our cultural life around us. We should be central figures in what happens in our world. We have the benefits of a great deal of education and time to work on problems and time to create. So what are we giving back to our culture? That's the question. Now, some of the critique that I want to share for a few minutes is, why are we so ineffective? The first one is that somewhat we are ineffective because we are psychologists. Now, why do I say that? Well, because when we think psychologically at the present time, we think about something inside the head. We don't talk with a person, we talk with what we think are going inside the person's head, the wants, the feelings, the hopes, and the dreams. We're not having a relationship with the person, we're having a relationship with something that's beyond the eyeball, something inside. And that whole individualist approach, that is, people are what's inside their head, in some way insulates us from being with them. I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes. We also very often work on what you might call abstract theory. That is, our concerns are with theoretical issues that are not part of the culture, they're part of our particular subculture in psychology. So we become very interested in, for example, evolution or brain process or cognitive process or emotional process in general, not in specific relationships with people, but our concern is with trying to contribute to these abstract, what we call truths about people. To place our emphasis on what is true about people in general means that we remove ourselves from people in particular, working with them. We also tend to work on problems that you might say are historically frozen. That is, with what is true for all people for all time. So that we test hypotheses about people in general with the belief that what is true and false in our data speaks across history and across culture. So we don't get into the flow of activity in which we are daily engaged, that continuous shift in what we say and what we do. Rather, we are kind of abstracted from it. And finally, we don't work with public concerns. We work with the concerns of our profession. Now, what I'm concerned with is trying to move into a profession that is concretely engaged with the people in our culture about concerns which are common to us all. Issues of love and anger and hate and hope, issues of poverty, issues of aggression, conflict, and so on. Issues which continue to change from day to day and which we need to be part of, we need to contribute to. So, how to do that? Well, for me, one of those moves, let's say the first move in this, is to change the very idea of psychology, change the very idea of the person. A lot of what I'm going to say now is you'll find in a book called Relational Being, and it's not yet translated into Spanish. I hope sometime it will be. Let me make this simple, though. We talk about processes of rationale, emotion, reasoning, emotion, and so on, as if they're inside the head. What if we change that concept so that when we talk about those processes, we're not talking about it inside the head, we're talking about something that happens out here between us, from within to between. So that we're never interested in isolated processes that happen off stage somewhere. We're interested in what goes on with people in their social relations from moment to moment. Let me clarify a little bit. Take, for example, the concept of reason. Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Now, how did Descartes know he was thinking? I mean, it's a hard question. How do you know you're thinking? How do you know right this moment that you have a thought? You will have a hard time answering that question. Because how do you know anything about an interior world that is inside the head? What do you do? Take the eyeballs and roll them back into the head so that you can see if there is something like a thought or an attitude or an emotion or a desire? I mean, it's a crazy idea. So if you ask yourself, how do you know you're thinking? How do you know you love? How do you know you're depressed? How do you know you're sad? You will have a very difficult time answering that question. All right, so let's forget the idea for a moment of an in here and an out there. Let's put everything between us and abandon the whole binary of in here, out there. Let's just say that's a long-standing distinction we made in Western history. Put it aside. Let's try something else. If I have a student paper and the student is writing, and I put in the margin of the paper, I say, good thinking. Now, I have no idea what's going on inside the head of the student. I don't know whether that student was thinking or not. How would I know? How would he know? Maybe God wrote the paper. I don't know where it came from. All I have is the writing. And when I say good thinking, I am talking about the writing. That is, writing which comes from a tradition of writing in our world. And what that student has done is to participate in the tradition. Are we okay? Everything all right with the camera? Okay. That is, the student in writing a paper has engaged in a social tradition, has used the words that we like to call rational, has used constructions of paragraphs that we like to call good reasoning. So try to look at reasoning then as not something I do in my head, but something I do within a social tradition. Okay. Now, what if we could take all that we have called psychology and put it out into the social world? So that whenever I'm talking about my memory or my emotion and so on, I am talking about something going on within a tradition of relationship. Memory, for example, another example. We think memories go on inside the head. Now, I don't know what memory is in terms of neurology, but I do know what it means in terms of relationship. For example, if I ask you to tell me about a football match that in Mexico City, let's say, I say, tell me what you remember about that football match, and you tell me left foot, right foot, shoe, green, goal, yelling, left foot, people, yelling, okay? And that's the way you tell me about that game. I'll say, you are really weird. Is something gone wrong with your brain? I mean, what? That's not a memory. I don't even know what it is. Now, you've said some words, you've given me an action, but in our tradition, we don't define that as good memory. If you tell me about that game in terms of who scored, what goal, what happened next in the game, and the game turned out that one team won, the other one lost, you have done perfectly well in giving me a memory. Now, what I'm saying here is that if you give me a well-formed narrative, by the way, my camera has stopped. Am I moving on your screen? Am I moving? I am frozen. I seem to be frozen here on the screen. Well, can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me, but I'm not moving. All right, then I'll just speak, and in a few minutes, maybe I'll actually move. Can I continue? Shake your head, yes. Okay. If you ask me for a memory of what happened in that game, and I give you a narrative that is a well-formed story, you will say, I have remembered well. In effect, the memory is the story, and my ability to do the story represents good memory. Ah, great. Hi, Ken. I'm saying reason then is a way of relating in a relationship. Memory is a way of relating in a relationship. Take the emotions. How do you feel? All right, now I'm saying that you will have a hard time looking inside to tell me how you feel. But let's look at feelings as something we do, as an action, a full action. So when I say I am angry, I'm doing that action. I'm engaging in a tradition, I'm not just doing biology. I'm engaging in a tradition of action. What do I mean? Well, let's say anger. I cannot do anger in any way, shape, or form. I cannot say, I'm really very angry. I mean, I can say that, but it looks weird. It looks strange that I should be smiling and pushing my head and saying, I am angry. If I say, I'm really angry, that begins to be an anger. I have some musical accompaniment. Are you okay? Are we still together? Okay. So anger is a way of being that you could recognize as anger. And if I say, oh, I am so angry, it's strange. It doesn't fit our cultural tradition for doing anger. Now, what I'm saying is that anger is a form of social life. It's a way of doing something. And not only is the way of doing it part of our cultural rules and traditions, but when I can do it, where I can do it, are also part of our rules. That is, I can't be angry if you say, well, I went out and on your automobile and your car, and I took the mud from your wheels. And I can't say, I'm really angry. I mean, it would make no sense. If you tell me I went out to your car and I took the wheels and stole them, then I can be angry. So anger is a way of doing something. It's a way of being, and there are rules for when you can do it and where you can do it and with whom. You can't be angry just anywhere and make sense. Now let's extend this just a little bit. If I am angry with you, if I come and say, look, I'm really angry at you, you will probably, in fact, almost surely ask me why. You want to know what the origin is, whether it's justified. And if it is justified, you have done something to hurt me. Well, let me say, look, once I've told you I'm angry and I've told you the reason, you don't have many choices about how you respond. You can apologize. I'm sorry I made you angry. I really didn't mean to do that. You can try to reframe it. Oh, I didn't mean to. You don't understand. It was a strange situation. You shouldn't really be angry. We call rationalization. You can deny it. That's what politicians do. You can be angry in return. But you don't have every choice. Now, what I'm getting at is that once you do anger, it's like being part of a dance. And we're both involved with it. All right, we're still together? All right. It's like part of a dance. I do my anger, you do your apology, I accept the apology, and we go on. I do the anger, you try to say it wasn't really my fault. I try to say, yes, it was. You say, no, it wasn't, and we continue on. Or I say I'm angry, you say, I'm angry at you then, and now I'm going to escalate because I probably will become even more angry, and so on. So we have a set of cultural dances. So anger is not just biology making us happen. It's part of a whole sequence of cultural dances. And we have the capacity to change those. Okay. There'll be time for questions later on. But now let me turn to an issue in psychology that would make sense in terms of having an impact, in terms of doing something with the culture. My concern here is with dialogue, or those cultural dances, but in this case, the way we talk together, dialogue. Psychology has not paid almost any attention to dialogue because it's not inside the head. But if we take inside the head and put it out into relationships, then dialogue is crucial. It's like how we talk together. What happens when we talk together? Now, you know from living in your culture that dialogues can take many different forms. You can have conversations together from which you come inspired and full and happy. You can have another conversation in which you feel full of love and hope, and other conversations or dialogues from which you become depressed, from which you become angry, and which might even lead to a kind of antagonism and even the desire to annihilate the other. Those are traditions. They're cultural forms. You have the capacity to create those forms, to change those forms, and they're absolutely vital. Let me talk about two kinds of cases. Education. I mean, education is a little bit like psychology, because we concentrate on what's in the student's head. And we evaluate you and put you into scales. How did you do in comparison with each other individual? In this way, we create antagonism, we create doubt, anxiety, and education becomes kind of dead. What if education as a process were more like dialogue, where we engage each other, where we are parts of traditions of talking with each other? I'll give you, what if classrooms were not a question of I teach and you listen, but let's talk together about this topic. Together. Let's make reason together. Let's make knowledge together. dialogic classrooms. With my university students, I even have dialogic exams or term papers. So I don't have them write a paper as an individual, writing a paper to no one in particular. I set them up in groups. And I say, look, instead of evaluating each of you, what I'd like to do is to evaluate the dialogue among you. And the first job they have is to sit down together and talk about what would be the criteria of a good dialogue. And it's different from the criteria of a good paper. Because they can say, well, a good dialogue is one in which we help each other. We try to give information to each other that they don't have. We try to care for each other. We try to give humor to each other, pay attention to each other. So I give them a topic, let's say a topic on the Western tradition of the self or something. And they have 1 week to carry out and they do it by email, a dialogue with each other about that topic. And at the end of the week, they give me the full text of the dialogue. Most of those are wonderful. The students become very involved. They bring pieces of work in from other courses, from other readings. They are funny, they are interesting, they care for each other. I read papers from those dialogues with ideas I had never heard before. Instead, if they wrote that paper for me, I almost know everything that can be said. But they're writing for each other and they're sharing. And new things happen, creativity, and they love it. Now, there's a case of using dialogue in education, not only as a teaching device in terms of content, but a teaching device in terms of a way of life, a way of being, a productive way of being. All right, let's turn to the society more generally. I like very much now the work of psychologists, and this could also be therapists, who try to create forms of dialogue, to create new ways of being. Take, for example, conflict. Now, we inherit, by traditions, a way of talking when we don't agree, which is an argument. We all know how to do argument. It's a form of dialogue. You say one thing, I disagree with it. I say something, you disagree with it. It's like an argument is like a war or combat, only simply done with words. And not much comes from it except more alienation. So trying to solve our problems with argument isn't going to get us very far. So how else could we go on? How else could we have dialogue when we are in conflict that is not alienating, that might bring us into a new space? I'm going to give you one example and then I think close the lecture here. But here are some friends of mine, and they are also, some of them are psychologists and therapists. They have a group called the Public Conversation Project. Public Conversation Project. And you can find them on the web under that name. And what they've done is to create a form of dialogue which can be used under conditions of severe conflict. They made their great fame in conflicts over abortion. And I don't know how it is in Mexico, but in our country, there are very extreme groups, one supporting women's rights to choose an abortion, as pro-life we call it, pro-choice, and the other saying that abortion is evil, is equivalent to murder or taking the life of a Holy Spirit. And they are the pro-life, call themselves pro-life. I'm sure you must have this conflict. Is that true? Yeah. All right, these groups are in heavy combat, really intense conflict. So much so that those who celebrate life will actually kill those who celebrate choice, ironically. So how to bring them into dialogue? Now, this is not easy because the very assumptions about what is a human being don't agree. You can't argue about when a person becomes a human being if the very definition is different. Argument will lead nowhere. So how do they proceed? Well, they invite groups of roughly 12 people, half pro-life, half pro-choice, together. Come and talk about the issues. So we are not trying to change your mind. We just want you to come and talk. The first thing they do is when they come is they have a meal together. Let's say they sit down for dinner. And they are asked not to talk about the issues. Don't talk about abortion and where you stand. Talk about anything else. So they talk about their children, they talk about the weather, they talk about taxes, talk about government. Everything which makes them common, that is, which gives them a sense, we are like each other. We know each other. You are my neighbors. You're like my friends. Okay, so you've now established each other not as aliens, but as somehow together. Okay, then they bring the groups together, and they have several kinds of requirements. First, they don't talk about the abstract issues, like when does someone become a human being. Rather, they ask, how did you come to your position? Tell us a story. So they tell stories, personal stories about themselves, about how they came either to value choice or to value pro-life. They tell stories about their abortion or their child's abortion and how sad they were. They tell stories about rape and so on. They tell very personal stories which grip the other. As if I tell you a story, when you listen to that story, you are me. You are playing out me. You are the protagonist. So when I hear a story about your life, I take on your life in a certain way. I become you. Okay. Then they begin to ask about, well, next question, what is at the heart of the matter for you? As why do you care about this? What really is important to you? And if you ask the question that way, they start talking about values, like the well-being of the mother, for example. Now, you can talk about that from both sides, because when you talk about those values, generally they are values which everybody has. So again, they look like they're similar to each other. They both want the same outcome. That is, nobody wants just massive abortions, and nobody is asking for that. But they are asking for the well-being of children, well-being of parents, well-being of communities. And finally, they ask them, where are your doubts? do you have any doubts about where you stand? And normally people have, if they're allowed to say it, they do have doubts. We all have doubts about everything we say, or we should have. And they share these. And again, they sound like each other. If I share my doubts about my position, I am sounding like you on the other side. Okay, now, and then the session is over. No one has changed their position. That is, they didn't go from pro-life to pro-choice, or vice versa. But they become the other. And what it means to disagree is different. It means we have disagreements, but we are together in the same communities. We've got to be somewhat more tolerant of each other. We've got to find mutual solutions. And I use this because it's been a very successful means of reducing conflict in a lot of groups. And what it shows is that you can create new ways of going on. You don't research the world, you create the world in terms of its future. And if you work with people, co-creating those futures, then I'd say what we can do as psychologists can be quite amazing. So thank you very much for your patience, and I hope that somehow I've been able to communicate something of my ideas today. And I invite you to raise questions or comment in any way you like. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah.
Look at this kind of beautiful people in the screens.
Yes, I've been watching.
Okay, okay. Ken, now that we are dealing with some performative dimensions of this activity, we really thank you for this wonderful keynote address. And let me see if someone wants to formulate an interesting question for you.
Okay, great.
Chavos, profesores, alumnos.
Doctor, ¿me escucha?
No, pero es para que las formulen acá y te las digo o qué. Que vayan para allá. Okay. Vale. Someone is coming, Ken.
Okay.
Perfecto.
Espérame, Poncho. Poncho,
¿Le pueden
espérame.
decir que me espere un momento?
Bueno, doctor, ¿me escucha?
Doctor, can you listen to me?
Yes.
Pero aquí tenemos los dos abiertos también.
¿Cómo le hago para ahí?
Es que...
¿Qué le correspondería como tal?
Tienen los dos micrófonos cerrados. Tienen que abrir uno.
So, doctor, the question is, who is in charge of doing this contribution to the culture and society, so that the persons we work with in the research get back from this and benefit from this research and this contribution?
Let me make sure. Who is in charge? You mean in terms of administration? Okay. I can talk if you like. Are you ready? Can you hear me? Okay. I'm not sure I'm answering this question in the way that you mean it, so let me try. My ideal here would be more collaborative, that is, to work with people insofar as we can, as more like action research or collaborative research. My hope would also be that professors and universities would support that kind of effort. Now, for a lot of professors, that means you have to publish work like this. And that's okay. There are many, many journals which promote and include action research or practices like public conversation projects. So it's easy enough to get that material out into the world. And I think it should be. Many people know about public conversations and use it and change it to fit their particular local circumstance. So ultimately, I'm thinking about a sort of a collaboration where professors and students work together, and they work together with the culture, and they work together with the academic network to share with the public more and with other professors more generally. Okay? Another comment?
¿Algún otro comentario?
Ken,
Hi.
can you hear me now?
No, I can, now I can. Yeah. Yep, all three of you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes?
Yes, okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, because, probably because of your last statement could be very interesting for us. Listen a little bit more about what is for you to be a public intellectual in the social world-wide society. O sea, lo que estoy preguntando que es para él el papel de ser un intelectual público.
Let me just say two things. One is, it is really exciting and enriching to be parts of different cultures and to have discussions around the world. And I learn, and I'm kept alive. I feel engaged with people from many, many different parts of cultures, from China, from South Africa, from Finland, and so on. It is a wonderful experience not to have a discipline, to be just part of the world. Now, it's also frightening because if you don't have a home base in a discipline like psychology, then in some way you don't have any anchor, you don't have any family, and that's a little frightening. And sometimes I regret that, but I don't regret it enough to want to go back to my family and simply live there. It's a little bit like if you, as students, looked at yourselves as not Mexican, but part of the world, so that you might go and live sometime in another country, and maybe from there you go to another country, and maybe you don't go back to Mexico, or maybe you do, but you're citizens of the culture at large, of the world at large, and not citizens of Mexico. And I think for the world, that's far better, that we don't think in terms of countries or nations. Nations are alienating. We should think of ourselves as part of again, related to humanity, not just to our nation. But it is a little bit lonely in the sense of not having a place that is truly my own, where everybody accepts me. It's a little bit frightening. So,
is another question. Okay. No? Yeah, okay. Let me see. Okay, please. Preciso para que. We have another question, Ken.
Okay.
What is the way? What is the best way you think it's the way for developing psychology, and specifically social psychology, for the benefit of society at the end of the day?
Yeah, well, this is a little bit my whole lecture. That is, I'm trying to say, get out of the laboratory, stop trying to test general theories, move into the culture, create things, create with the culture, use your intellect and your knowledge to collaborate in the culture for social change. That's pretty much my answer.
Ken, I'm once again with you because we need to finish up this keynote address. Ken, I really appreciate all your effort to be with us. This virtual meeting has been very successful, and I know that our students are very thankful with you. And just to let you know that we are very happy, we all be clapping for your keynote address now. Okay? See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for your patience.
You're so welcome. And I wish you well.
Deseo lo mejor